Hey gang, it's DrDeb again, and this time in situation 17, I want you to learn an important piece, which is that when we have a fear or some kind of a problem that has come from childhood, it doesn't mean that it's a big, large thing. It could be very subtle and still hurt. Subtle things can feel like a needle, hurting, stabbing, or even a knife. So I want you to get that, because it's not just the idea that her husband might actually abandon her like when he was traveling all night. They're going to work that through in the next video, but right now what we're going to talk about is how the subtle things in your life might affect you in ways you're not even conscious of. And we're going to use Cheryl and her fear of abandonment as an example. So I want to just kind of plunge right in with a scenario. Cheryl was invited to a holiday party and at work. And at work, she has a very good position in the office. She's respected for her work. She does a great job. And she was busy, I guess, and did not put in what she was going to bring to whoever was coordinating the party. And when she put in that she wanted to bring a certain vegetable dish, she was told, no, we've already got the vegetable dish. And we've already got the salad. And we've already got some different meats for the main course. And we've already got bread. Somebody is making fresh bread. And we've already got dessert. You know what I mean? By the time they got through with it, Cheryl had this sinking feeling in her pit of her stomach. And like her chest started to not feel like she could breathe. And she couldn't understand why. On the surface, this is a very simple thing. Come up with something everybody would like that hasn't already been thought of. And they said, well, why don't you bring some sodas? You know, bring a few bottles of soda that's going to be able to take care of people who don't want alcoholic drinks. And she said, well, I guess I could bring alcoholic drinks. And at least she thought she'd be giving something substantial. And they said, well, the company is actually going to pay for that for us. So that's really nice. And it gets expensive. So we don't need that. And she drove home with this feeling. And when she kind of tapped into it, it became, I'm not wanted. They don't want me. What I have to contribute isn't good. And she's like, why are you being silly? Because she now understands from the work that she's done that she can talk to herself. She can talk to those parts of her that are saying all these things. And so she said to her part that was feeling this, why are you being silly? It's okay. And the part said, it's the same old thing. I'm just not wanted. No one wants what I have to contribute. Whatever it is that I am, that I bring to the company, to the group, isn't good enough. They could do without me. And you know, she could not seem to argue against that part. And as the day progressed, she felt sadder and sadder and sadder. And she went to therapy at her next appointment, and that mood had not lifted. You see, I just want to cut here and talk to you a little bit about that. This is her fear of abandonment. Now, she's not actually being abandoned. I mean, she still has her job, and no one's firing her, and they still like her at work, at least for the work she puts out. But the feeling she has is, okay, they like the work that I put out, but do they like me? Am I worth it? Do they give me the time of day? Do they stop by my cubby and say hi? So that actually is triggered by that old feeling of a fear of abandonment. And she's kind of aware of that, but she doesn't know how to get out of it. Because the real truth there is that although she is aware of it, she hasn't got that perspective that comes from self-energy that's big enough to fight against, argue against that message from her hurt part. And she can't console that hurt child without having that perspective. She's been sucked into it. That's called being blended. She's blended with that hurt part. And so she goes to therapy to discuss it. And the therapist says to her, so you're telling me that you're feeling really hurt? And she says, yes, I feel it right here. And I had this drop in the pit of my stomach when I first heard. And I feel like a crushing feeling here, like I can't breathe. And my whole mood has been horrible. And her therapist said to her, can you tell me what thoughts you have that go along with it? And she said, I'm just not wanted. I don't feel wanted. And the therapist asked her to do something which, again, is hard to do when you're so blended. Can you see that hurt child? And she said, yes, I definitely can. I was a sad, lonely little kid. I spent a lot of time by myself. And it was okay. It wasn't bad. It only became bad when I felt unwanted by everyone else. And the therapist said, do you see it the same way as your hurt child sees it? Do you see yourself as unwanted by the coworkers? And immediately the hurt child in her piped up and said, yes, that's how I see it. And the therapist said, tell me more about that. How come? Is that true every day? Or is it just in relationship to this particular party? And she thought, and she said, no, it's not every day. Actually, I was given an honor recently for something I did at work that was very helpful to the company, and I myself was proud of it. And the therapist said, how is that not good enough? And she said, because it's not me as a person, it's me as a worker. And the therapist said, does anybody at work know each other? Do you know other people more as people? I mean, you have been there 10 years. How well do you know them? And Cheryl thought about it, and she said, well, it's true, I don't really. I know who's married and who's divorced, and that's just about it. We have one single man there, an older guy. Truth is, I don't know much about them. The therapist said, do you know their preferences? Like, have you gone out to eat with people? Do you know what they like to eat? And Cheryl said, well, I haven't done that enough to really know. And the truth is, we don't seem to have enough time for it because we need to be on a kind of rotating shift so that everyone who is out can be covered by someone who's not out at the same time. So I'm not really feeling like I do know. So the therapist said, so you don't know them too well. Do you value any of them particularly, even though you don't know them? And she said, well, Katie is really kind. She's just really nice. If you need something, she's going to be there to help you. And Mary's a bit standoffish. I have nothing much to do with Mary. Joe comes around my desk and he's pleasant and tries to help me with stuff. If I have a little bit of overwork, he's very nice. So you do know them a little bit. What do you think, the therapist said? What do you think of Kate and Joe? What do you think they think of you? And she said, well, honestly, they've been so nice to me, they must feel I'm someone they want to be nice to. And the therapist said, okay. How does that land inside of you? How does that affect how you were thinking before? And Cheryl sat there and she started to brighten and she said, you're right. You are absolutely right. I'm okay. I'm really okay. Those people did not want to abandon me after all. So now we have a different scenario for Cheryl. And the same thing happened 3 weeks later in this scenario. Cheryl and the organization she belongs to in the community, it's a charitable organization that always has auctions and fundraisers for needy kids. And it's very sweet. And she just puts in a few hours a month. She doesn't have a lot of time, but she's gotten to know people over a little bit of time there. And they were having another fundraiser coming up, and she volunteered at a group meeting to be the one to find a location, but they already found a location. And she volunteered to find vendors that could auction off their stuff for the fundraiser. And they already had someone who was in charge, and that person already had done that, and etc. And once again, it struck her, I'm not wanted. My contribution isn't valued. And how in the world could this be? How is it? And she just had that same collapsing feeling in the pit of her stomach, that same feeling of abandonment. Because you see, abandonment isn't like someone literally walking out the door. It could be abandoning you for 5 minutes. I heard a story of someone whose mother, elderly and a little bit of a shut-in, needs to be called every day, at least once, if not twice or 3 times, because she's alone and she feels abandoned if her daughter doesn't call. Now, Cheryl's young and healthy and she goes out and she's in the world, so hers is a little bit more subtle, because her abandonment feeling comes from the fact that she's there and her contributions are not accepted. Even though her contributions are not her, it's still a part of her. It's a part of her that she values, right? If you are capable of functioning in a group, in a communal organization type of thing, or at work, and you do well with it, and your contribution is not wanted, it can lead to that same feeling of abandonment. So again, Cheryl brings this to therapy, and again, the same line of questions comes up. Well, have you done this before? And how did that go? And have you contributed in the past? And of course, Cheryl has. And have they liked it? They have. So again, by asking her questions to bring in a larger perspective on the situation, the therapist helps Cheryl to see the big picture and to see that she herself has not been rejected, because to her, that's the same as abandonment. So I want to wrap this one up, and we're going to go next into Cheryl in session with her husband in another form of IFS therapy called IFIO, Internal Family Systems, which is intimacy from the inside out.